The Colorado Territory in 1883 was a land carved by violence and shaped by desperation. Winter had come early to the high desert, blanketing the sagebrush and pinyon pines in a cruel layer of snow that glittered like broken glass under the pale sun. It was the kind of cold that killed quietly, creeping into bones and lungs until even the strongest warriors fell like autumn leaves. Jake Thornton rode his black stallion through the frozen wasteland, his breath forming white clouds in the bitter air. At 35, Jake was a man who had learned to read the language of survival written in wind patterns and animal tracks. His weathered leather coat bore the scars of a dozen close calls, and his green eyes held the steady calm of someone who had faced death and walked away more times than most men had faced Sunday morning. He was a bounty hunter by trade, though he preferred to call himself a tracker. The distinction mattered to him, even if it didn't matter to the men who paid him. Jake hunted missing persons, stolen livestock, and the occasional outlaw, but he had never taken a contract on Apache, not because he was squeamish about Indian fighting, but because he had learned long ago that Apache warriors were the most dangerous prey on the continent, and smart men didn't hunt what could hunt them back better. Today he was following a different kind of trail. 3 days ago, a frantic Mexican trader named Vasquez had stumbled into the mining town of Cedar Ridge with a story that had made every man in the saloon reach for his gun. A band of Apache had attacked his wagon train 50 miles north, killing his guards and stealing his horses, but they had left something behind that made no sense: gold. Mexican gold coins scattered on the ground like seeds, as if the Apache had taken what they wanted and abandoned what white men valued most. The territorial governor had posted a $1,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of the stolen horses and the capture of the Apache responsible. It was more money than Jake usually saw in a year, enough to buy a small ranch and maybe settle down somewhere the wind didn't cut through a man's coat like a cavalry saber. But as Jake followed the cold trail through the snow-covered wilderness, he began to suspect that Vasquez's story had more holes than a target at a shooting match. The tracks told a different tale, not of a raid, but of flight. The horses had been running hard, not being driven for profit but for survival. And the gold coins weren't scattered randomly. They had been dropped in a deliberate line, as if someone were leaving a trail for followers to find. Jake reined in his stallion and studied the landscape ahead. A narrow canyon cut through the red sandstone cliffs, its walls rising like the sides of a cathedral. The horse tracks led directly into its mouth, and Jake's experienced eyes could see that they didn't come out the other side. Whatever he was tracking had gone to ground in that canyon, and Jake's instincts told him that he was about to discover something that would change his understanding of everything Vasquez had told him. As he guided his horse toward the canyon entrance, Jake noticed something that made his blood run cold. Mixed in with the horse tracks were the smaller prints of human feet, women and children, running through the snow without proper shoes. This hadn't been a raiding party at all. This had been a family, fleeing for their lives, and they had run straight into a trap from which there might be no escape. The wind picked up, howling through the canyon like the voice of some ancient spirit crying out a warning. Jake pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders and rode forward into the shadows between the stone walls, following a trail that would lead him to a choice between $1,000 in reward money and something far more valuable and dangerous than gold. The canyon was a maze of twisted passages and hidden alcoves, carved by centuries of flash floods and sculpted by wind into fantastic shapes that seemed to shift and change in the uncertain light. Jake moved carefully, his hand never far from the Colt .45 at his hip, reading the story written in disturbed snow and scuffed rock. The trail was easy to follow now, too easy. Whoever was leading this group had either lost all skill at concealment or was deliberately making their path obvious. Jake suspected the latter, which meant he was probably riding into an ambush. But something about the smaller footprints, the stumbling gait of exhaustion and cold, kept him moving forward despite his better judgment. He found them in a sheltered alcove about a mile into the canyon, and the sight made him rein in his horse so abruptly that the stallion snorted in protest. Huddled around the dying embers of a small fire were the remnants of what had once been a thriving Apache band, perhaps 30 people, mostly women, children, and elders, their faces gaunt with hunger, and their traditional clothing inadequate protection against the brutal cold. But it was the woman standing guard at the entrance to the alcove who captured Jake's attention completely. She was perhaps 25 years old, with the kind of beauty that would have launched wars in ancient times and caused poets to abandon their senses. Her long black hair was braided with silver threads that caught the firelight, and her dark eyes held an intelligence and determination that spoke of royal bloodlines and warrior traditions. She wore the clothing of an Apache princess, intricately beaded deerskin dress, silver jewelry that spoke of wealth and status, and knee-high moccasins decorated with symbols that Jake didn't recognize but somehow understood spoke of power and protection. In her hands, she held a Winchester rifle with the easy competence of someone who had learned to shoot before she had learned to read. When she saw Jake, she didn't flee or take cover like a typical refugee. Instead, she stepped forward into the open, placing herself between him and her people with the fearless courage of a mother wolf protecting her cubs. Her rifle remained pointed at the ground, but Jake could see that she could bring it to bear in less than a heartbeat if necessary. "You are the tracker," she said in surprisingly clear English, her voice carrying the melodic accent of someone who had learned the white man's language as a second tongue. "The one they call Thornton." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. His reputation had apparently traveled farther than he had realized. "Depends on who's asking," he replied, keeping his voice level and his hands visible. The woman studied him with eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "I am Aiyana, daughter of Chief Running Bear, granddaughter of the war chief Manuelito. My people are dying, and you are the only white man in this territory who might help us survive. Lady, I don't know what you've heard about me, but I'm just a tracker. I find things for money. I'm not in the business of saving anybody." Aiyana took another step toward him, and Jake could see the desperation barely held in check behind her proud facade. "The soldiers came to our winter camp 3 days ago. They said we were harboring raiders, but that was a lie told by men who wanted our horses and our women. My father tried to negotiate, tried to show them that we had no weapons, no warriors, only families trying to survive the winter." She paused, and Jake could see her struggle to maintain composure as she continued. "They killed my father while he held a white flag of truce. They killed the elders who tried to protect the children. They took our young women to sell to the mining camps, and they drove us into the wilderness to die of cold and hunger." Jake felt his jaw clench despite himself. He had seen enough of frontier justice to know that such stories were often true, and the evidence before his eyes, 30 refugees hiding in a canyon with winter closing in around them, supported every word she said. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said carefully, "but I still don't see what you want from me." Aiyana lifted her chin with the pride of generations of chiefs and warriors. "I want you to help us reach the reservation at Canyon de Chelly. It is 8 days' travel through country controlled by the soldiers who hunt us. In return, I will give you something more valuable than the reward money you came here seeking." Jake raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" The Apache princess looked him directly in the eye with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. "I will give you myself, and I will bear you strong sons who will carry both Apache wisdom and white man's cunning. Together, we will build something greater than either of our peoples could achieve alone." Jake stared at Aiyana for a long moment, trying to process what she had just offered him. In all his years on the frontier, he had encountered many desperate people, willing to trade anything for survival. But never had he heard such a proposal delivered with such dignity and calm certainty. "Ma'am," he said finally, "I think the cold might be affecting your judgment. You don't know anything about me, and what you're suggesting. I know that you have never taken Apache scalps for bounty money, though many trackers do," Aiyana interrupted. "I know that you returned the Navajo children you found at Bitter Creek to their families instead of turning them over to the Indian agents for the reward. I know that you tracked down the men who raped and murdered the Mexican woman at Dos Rios and brought them to justice when the sheriff was too afraid to act." Jake felt his face flush with surprise and something that might have been embarrassment. His good deeds, such as they were, had been done quietly and without expectation of recognition. The fact that this Apache woman knew about them suggested an intelligence network far more sophisticated than most white settlers realized existed among the tribes. "Stories get told differently depending on who's doing the telling," he said gruffly. "Stories reveal the character of a man more clearly than his words," Aiyana replied. "And your character is why I make this offer to you instead of to another." Behind her, Jake could see the other members of her band watching the conversation with the intense attention of people whose lives hung in the balance. He noticed several young mothers holding babies who were too quiet, too still, the kind of ominous silence that meant hunger and cold were already claiming the weakest members of the group. "Even if I wanted to help," Jake said, "getting 30 people across hostile territory in winter isn't just dangerous, it's damn near impossible. The soldiers aren't the only problem. There's no food, no shelter, and temperatures that drop below freezing every night. You think we do not know this?" Aiyana's voice carried an edge of impatience. You think Apache people have survived in this land for generations without understanding cold and hunger and danger? We ask for your help not because we are helpless, but because we need someone the soldiers will not expect. Someone who knows the white man's ways of thinking and moving. She gestured toward the mouth of the canyon. They expect us to flee south toward Mexico or north toward the Ute country. They will not expect us to travel with a white tracker who can talk to their patrols and convince them that he is hunting us instead of helping us. Jake had to admit the logic was sound, though the risks were staggering. If he were caught helping Apache refugees escape, he would be charged with treason and probably hanged. His reputation and his livelihood would be destroyed even if he managed to avoid the gallows. And if I get you to